So I'll be quoting throughout this presentation a very well-known report called the McGraw-Hill Smart Market Report. And McGraw-Hill has written reports for the US, well actually North America, for Europe. They recently did a report for the Middle East. They've done them for Australia, for all over Asia, but they have not done a report for Turkey. But I was able to find a few facts and figures about Turkey in my studies to try to do a good presentation for you here. So it is pretty, looks like I lost some bullets in the process, sorry. So within the next 2 years, it's believed that 50% of all of the requests for proposals in the AEC industry are going to require BIM. So that means that if you do not adopt BIM, and this is probably a little less here because many of the corporations here are just starting to implement BIM, but that you would have to win twice as many RFPs, requests for proposal, that do not include BIM just to keep your same level of business. And this is probably more relevant in more of the countries that have adopted BIM, but soon it's going to be the case here in Turkey. And we're going to talk about some reasons why you should make the move to BIM and governments that have made the move to BIM. Most notably, recently, the UK mandated that by the year 2016, if you were going to do any projects in the public sector industry, you had to at least have some level of BIM adoption. And as a result of that, the European Union recently also mandated or suggested strongly that countries adopt BIM in their projects. And as a result of that, more and more countries are starting to get on board. And I travel all over the world doing these presentations, and I can tell you that, for example, in Australia, Australia is very BIM focused. So I feel like they're one of the most prominent nations in the world and have really adopted BIM. North America as well, but as I travel around, some countries are a little more behind that curve than others. This just kind of gives you, this is like a lot of information on here, but many of the different countries that have implemented some type of a BIM initiative. So, as I mentioned to you, I can tell from traveling that the future of the AEC industry is definitely in BIM adoption. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is BIM, the definition of BIM. We'll talk about the advantages of making the move to BIM, how to get on board with BIM, and some recommended implementation techniques. And then we're going to all have a cocktail. Okay? No? You guys are tired. I have like the last class in the day. How did I get the last class in the day? I always want the first class in the day, maybe the second. So what is BIM? We're going to start at the very beginning. BIM is an intelligent, model-based process that provides value across the life cycle of a project. It's creating a smart and intelligent model from the very beginning of the design process, the conception of a building or a bridge or a highway, to the very end, when the building or the bridge or the highway or whatever you happen to be building is put into place and used. And there are about 1,000 different definitions of BIM. I'm not going to attempt to convince you that this is the best one, but it's a good one. It's a good, solid one. So I think it's also very important to note that BIM is not a software, it is a process. You cannot go to the store and buy BIM. BIM is not Revit, BIM is not Civil 3D, BIM is not AutoCAD. Those are tools to help you implement BIM. I will say that normally when people think of BIM, they think of our more advanced tools like Revit or Civil 3D than they do AutoCAD. Is it not going to change now? There we go. So let's talk a little bit about what is a BIM model, which is redundant, incidentally. Building Information Modeling Model. It's very redundant. But let's talk about the model. So it's a smart model. It has intelligent objects. It doesn't have lines, arcs, and circles. It has doors and walls and windows. And they understand a variety of different things, including the relationship between one object to another. They can include all different types of information. I have some examples up here. Could be how you put it together, the assembly procedure, could be the cost of the item, could be the manufacturer, but it's made up of intelligent objects. It's a 3D digital model that's assembled the same way as a building is constructed. I'm going to use building as an example throughout most of this presentation. You can put in bridge or roadway or whatever you want to. So that's very different than what we use are used to in CAD or in AutoCAD. We're not used to thinking about the order that a building is constructed. We just put lines, arcs, and circles and blocks in a drawing. So this is a slightly different process than what we're used to. And a BIM model is also a database of geometric information and non-graphic information. So it's what you see, that's very important, but there's a lot of information that goes on behind the scenes as well. And that's what makes the model really valuable. And I just like this quote. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a BIM model is worth 1,000,000. So much more intelligent information than what you can put into a CAD model. You'll find fewer construction orders with BIM, because by the time you get to the construction phase of whatever it is you are building, you've already tested it, you've made sure that everything fits together, you've done things like clash detection, so that by the time you get to the construction phase, you don't have so many what we call RFIs, or requests for information. If you take a look at how much it costs to build, we'll just say once again a building, about 25% of the amount of money that's spent on that building is wasted, and it's wasted in the construction phase. That's a pretty big number. So as you can imagine, building owners are very focused on moving to BIM because it will save them time and it will save them money. And then I'm not sure how well this translates, but this is a boat that supposedly was built on change orders. Change orders are very expensive. And when you don't figure something out until you get to the construction phase, you are wasting a lot of money. I don't know if that translates here as much. And you heard me earlier talk about clash detection. How amazing is it to be able to check to make sure everything fits together, once again, before you get to the construction phase. Changes, when you're on the spot, when you're on site, those are expensive. If you can eliminate them before you get there, saves a lot of money. And you also saw this earlier, once again, one of our products, BIM 360 Glue, which allows you to take more than 50 different file types, put them together into one model that can be tested for a variety of different things. If you weren't here this morning, you can see the clashes that are showing up. Red is bad. I always comment on that. At this point in time, you can send an email to the design team responsible and tell them that they need to make some adjustments. And you can run these collision clash detections as many times as you need. You will also find that if you make the move to BIM, that there will be an increase in prefabrication. If you were to take a look at responses from contractors, they forecast that model-driven prefabrication will definitely improve their returns. 73% of contractors, this is a North American number incidentally from that same McGraw-Hill SMART report. Anytime you can invest in prefabrication, you will ultimately save money in the overall project. Other things you can do with the BIM model that you really can't do with something like an AutoCAD model, even if the AutoCAD model is in 3D, is to test it from an energy standpoint to see if you can make it more sustainable. You can do structural analysis. You can do environmental analysis. There's all kinds of things that you can do with the BIM model to test it. And if you were to go one step further, as you get more involved in BIM, maybe not right off the bat, but you can add in scheduling. So we get not just 3D, but you get to 4D with scheduling, and you can add in cost estimation. There's your 5D, right? So as you continue to make your models more and more intelligent, you can actually figure out how much it's going to cost at any given time and how you should actually assemble it. This happens to be a roadway, which I'll be talking about in more detail. This is an actual project. It's right by where I live, and they were able to fairly closely estimate where this road would be at any given time. So another advantage to adopting BIM is that you can add in the aspect of 3D visualization. On the left-hand side here, you see a rendering of a water treatment plant, and then on the right-hand side, you can actually see what it looked like when it was all built. Any type of visualization is very helpful in making sure that you're able to communicate your ideas with others, including the people that are building it. It's always good when you can see the finished goal. With a BIM model, it's much easier to do things like high-end renderings. So I'm sure many of you have to communicate projects in your job. I'm sure you do have to convince other people to either allow you to do the project or to win over the community, whatever the situation is. And I'm sure that many of you, maybe you do it like this. Maybe you're a little more high-tech than this. But wouldn't it be nice if you could do it like we see over on the right? This is using one of our products called InfraWorks. And InfraWorks makes it very easy for you to, in this case, take a look at an overpass that they're making and just show it what it would look like in real life. Looks like there was a little bit of a delay there. If you could present a project like that, there's a good chance you would win that project. It's very clear, the design intent, and it looks great. And it looks cool. So recently, CG Architect did a survey, and they asked their architects what they, how more likely were they to win competitive bids if they had really good visualizations in their proposals. And no surprise, 90% of them said that if they had great looking visualizations to communicate their ideas, that they stood a better chance of winning the project. They also were able to win over in those cases where you had communities that you had to win over. It was easier when you could show the community exactly what the finished project would look like. I thought I'd just kind of give you a stat on how powerful the software has come in the world of visualization. I'm sure, you probably don't have IKEA out here. Do you have IKEA stores out here? You do, so you know exactly, I don't know if you do, and it's pretty much worldwide. And if you were to take a look at the IKEA catalog, only half of the pictures in the IKEA catalog are actual photographs. The other half are computer generated, which may be why nothing fits together when you buy it, but that's beside the point. So that just kind of shows you how powerful visualizations are. This is actually a picture of a hotel room for Marriott. They used to physically build all their hotel rooms and allow the owners to take a look at them via photographs, but now they do everything via renderings. So one of these is a photograph, and the other one is a rendering. I'm not sure if you can tell which is which. How many of you think that this is the photograph? The photograph? How many of you think this is the photograph? Look, about half and half. So this is the photograph. I'm sure if you're a rendering expert, you could probably figure that out. I can give you a little hint, though. When you're rendering something, you don't want too many objects in the picture. So actually, just by the fact that there are other things in the picture over here, like pieces of paper and just more things to model, that kind of is a tip-off to me that that is the actual photograph. But the point is that it's very difficult to tell. Half of you raise your hand for one, and half of you raise your hand for the other. And certainly, to somebody that you're presenting a proposal, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So this is the project I was talking about. This is Buy My House. If you've anybody been to San Francisco? A few of you. If you've been to San Francisco, I'm sure you've been to the Golden Gate Bridge, a very famous bridge. We don't actually let you out of San Francisco until you see the bridge. And the bridge is not golden. It's kind of orange, right? So the Golden Gate Bridge is a very famous icon. When you go north into San Francisco over the Golden Gate Bridge, there is a roadway that was built back in 1941. Back in 1941, there weren't that many cars. And it is very tight and congested all the time. You guys know a little bit about traffic here in Turkey, am I right? Just a little bit. So you also have lots of traffic. So do we, not maybe as much as you. But when you go over north over the Golden Gate Bridge, this roadway is always incredibly congested. And it also is not earthquake proof. And if you know anything about San Francisco, we have our regular earthquakes going on all the time. So they were able to procure the money from the government for this 1.5 miles of road. So I don't know how you translate that into kilometers. They got $1.05 billion to fix this roadway. That's a lot of money. The only problem was that the community didn't buy into this project. The community thought it was going to look like it was a freeway. It was right through a very expensive part of town where all the big mansions are, and the community would not buy off on the project. I don't know how it is here in Turkey, but in San Francisco, if you can't win over the community, you don't get to win the project. It's just that simple. So Parsons Brinkerhoff, I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, a large firm. They were in charge of moving forward with the project. They were the project managers. And they decided to create a video to show the community what it would look like so that they would buy off on it and they could move forward with the project. Here's the video. This video was done in 3ds Max Design and Civil 3D. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge. There's always a lot of fog over the Golden Gate Bridge. And that roadway over there on the right, that is Doyle Drive. And this is definitely not real life because this doesn't show you all the traffic. It's definitely a video. And then in a second, you're going to see the metamorphosis that they suggested. You can see it's an amazing visualization. They added some cut and cover tunnels. It actually looks a little bit nicer than it did before the project. They added quite a bit of grass. Looks pretty. And as a result of this video and this visualization, they were able to move forward with the project. So this was a really big deal. It just kind of shows you the power of adding in visualization. As I mentioned to you, we have a product called InfraWorks 360, where you could take something like your Revit model, and you could put it in the actual place it would reside in a city, for example. InfraWorks 360, I don't know if you've heard much about it today, is an amazing program. You can literally type in an address, and it will generate a city for you, and then you can put in your bridge or your roadway or your building to show it in a proposal. If you could do something like this and it wasn't really difficult, I bet you would do it. And that's the goal behind InfraWorks 360. So I just thought I'd give you an example of a company that I worked with in Wellington, New Zealand, that went to the city planners and asked them if they could build this building. It's a multi-story residential building, but they wanted to build it in the old section of town. And as a result, the city planner said no, because we don't think it will fit into the architecture, it won't look good. So this company, ArcHouse, went back and they designed 4 different Revit models. And they showed what the Revit models would look like in the actual community. And they went back to the city planners and showed them what the buildings would look like actually in the location in the town, and the city planners changed their mind. They allowed the city planners to pick the model they thought would fit the most. They went back, designed it, and the building has been built and is a very successful, very popular building. It's a very green building. It's LEED certified. It has regenerative elevators. It has sustainable paint. It's got a garden on the top. And one of the things about the city of Wellington is it's very windy. So they were able to harness that energy from the wind and able to, 40% of the energy for the building is from the wind turbine. So it's a very, very impressive building, solar, everything. But just shows you an example where visually they were told no, and we're able to change the minds by showing a visualization. And then this is probably the part that us CAD people can appreciate the most, is that when you have a model, for example, a Revit model, you grab all the construction documents, all the schedules, all the elevations, everything is generated from the model. And that's how you get your construction documents. The great thing about that is, if the model changes, so do the construction documents. Everything is updated. Whenever you make a change to the model, everything else gets updated. And you know, if you're an AutoCAD user, it doesn't go like that in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, you have to keep track of all the changes, update all the details, update all the schedules, and so on and so forth. It's very painful. So there are, as I mentioned to you, there are a variety of reports that are done by a well-known company called McGraw-Hill. And so these are called the SMART reports. There's one for Europe, there's one for Middle East. You can Google them, they're free. You can download them if you like facts and figures. I love facts and figures. You will love this report. Or if you can't sleep at night, it will also help you sleep. But lots of facts and figures. So I'm just going to be sharing with you some facts. Most of them are from the North American report. And some of them are also from Europe, and you'll see that in the actual information. So here's some facts. 65% of building owners are requesting BIM. That's in the US and Western Europe. That's a lot. So if you don't offer BIM, you're out. You have to go find the other 35%. Overall, the BIM adoption in the AEC industry went from 49% up to 70% within 5 years. That's a lot. And that was in 2012. I can promise you that number is higher now. And this is in North America. Nearly half of the civil firms are using BIM. 70% of architects have adopted BIM, at least in some level. And if you take a look at that fact, 75% of architects work in small offices of 10 or less, and they have adopted BIM. I don't know how big your companies are that you're working for. 67% of structural and MEP report participating in BIM projects. I would probably say MEP understands the most value, but I know in North America they seem to be the furthest behind. And contractors totally get BIM. And in the US, in North America, 74% have adopted BIM. That's a very high number. And however, if you take a look at the statistics in Europe, it's about half of that. So contractors and people in the construction phase are lagging behind that in North America. Still a decent number. Contractors see the highest ROI, return on investment. So if you are in the construction industry, it's very clear to you how you can save money, because once again, you can test everything, make sure everything works before you build anything, even start on the foundation. So just a few more. You may not like facts and figures as much as I do. 2/3 of BIM users see a positive ROI on their overall investment within the first year. We will talk about that in more detail. But once you adopt BIM, it takes a while to make the move to BIM, so you may not see a return on your investment until after the first year. So that's reality. You can see here they're saying that 2/3 did see a return on investment within the first year, but that means 1/3 did not. So something for you to think about, and we'll talk about that. Clash detection, we talked about that, and avoiding any type of rework was one of the top rated benefits of the building owners. That makes sense. Once again, saving money on the construction phase. And 90% of the medium-sized to large organizations had adopted BIM. You will see that prevalent all over the world. The larger organizations are adopting BIM, and as a result of that, many of us have been pulled along. The most engaged users enjoyed the strongest BIM benefits. I actually attended a presentation from one of the gentlemen who puts together these reports, and he used the analogy of a pool. He said if you put 1 foot in, you will see some of the advantages of BIM, but it's not until you really jump in with 2 feet, and I'm just quoting him, that you will really start to see the benefits. That doesn't mean you need to jump in with 2 feet to begin with, but it certainly means that those are the people that really get it and really see the advantages of BIM. It'll take you a while before you're to that point. I just find this quote amusing, and so I include it in my presentations. Because the UK is far along for enforcing BIM adoption, they have the BIM UK task force that put together a document, something else you might want to take a look at, the BIM UK task force. You can look that up because it's certainly not biased. They're trying to help people become successful at adopting BIM, and they put this quote in there, which I found amusing. The actual software is what they meant. The authoring tools cost about the same as a pint and a half of beer a day. Only in the UK would they equate something to beer. I just found it amusing. And for those of you who are in the civil industry, infrastructure industry, there's a report just for you as well, and that we can definitely see the trend of making the move to BIM is accelerating. I think that's one of the hardest industries to actually convince. The nice thing about any of you, civil, infrastructure, anybody? The nice thing is that you can stay in Civil 3D. You don't need to move to a different software product and be just as successful. Right, so just a few advantages. If you have a true 3D BIM model, you would never have this happen. This is an actual photograph where the contractor saw that revision cloud that the architect made and thought it was supposed to be part of the ceiling. Here's an example where clash detection would have come in handy. I just love the fact that they worked around the lamppost. This is what happens when architecture and mechanical meet. So I'm sure they had a manufacturing model, and they didn't bother to put it in the architectural model. And I'm just kind of amused that this escalator managed to get this far. Don't you think somebody might have noticed that it wasn't going to work? But no, they continued to construct it, and I'm sure somebody made a lot of money on the change order that was requested to fix this problem. Or somebody lost a lot of money as well. And this is a balcony that really isn't doing anybody any good, that I like to believe would have been noticed if it was a true 3D model. This is my favorite. This is an actual ATM that was built with no concept of how high off the ground that was. It's very difficult to use it unless you are a giant. And I asked somebody if they ever fixed this, and they said yes, they did. They put a stool next to the ATM, which I find amusing. So if you are from a large company, so I don't know how big your companies are, if you're from a large company, it's much easier for you to lead the way with BIM because everybody who works with you, any of the consultants who work with you, they all kind of have to follow your lead. If you work for a small company, and I've done a lot of presentations to small companies, small businesses, you tend to be the last ones to jump on board with BIM, but the nice thing about it is that small businesses are more limber and it's easier for them to make the change. The process is probably the biggest barrier for small industries, but they don't have to convince a board of directors or investors that they need, that in the process of making the move to BIM. They can just decide they want to do it. So let's say you decide to make the move to BIM. You're like, okay, that sounds good. Maybe Lynn convinced you. You should at least take one step and put it in the water. What do you do about it? So what happens? So the worst thing you could possibly do is you could go back to the office and tell your employees that you're moving to BIM and you're going to like it. And I see this happen all the time. I've actually, because of my AutoCAD background, have been brought into many companies to try to calm down all the AutoCAD people and to tell them how their lives are going to be better once they make the move to BIM. I don't like doing that. I'd rather not do that. I would rather people just do it the right way. So if you get your staff on board, especially those of you who work on large companies, you will be way more successful. I promise you, if you do not do this right, you will have a very slow move over to the world of BIM. I absolutely believe that BIM is 10% technology and 90% sociology. 10% is actually what you have to do, and 90% of it is winning the people over to get them to move, because I've seen it. So BIM is a big deal, It requires two different things. There's going to be a change in process, and there's probably going to be a change in technology. Both of those are a big deal, and both of those will scare your employees. I'm assuming you all own the company now. Can you tell? Now you all own your company. So here's some realities. The software could totally change. The work product model totally changes. The workflow totally changes. So I wonder why anybody would be nervous about that. It's a change. I really think about it like when they made the move from drafting to CAD. I was involved in some of that in the early days. I started teaching CAD in the very early days of AutoCAD, and I spent most of the time calming the drafters and the designers down and telling them that it could work, they can do it, while they kept saying to me, I could have drawn this by now, I could have totally had this finished. Making the move to CAD was very painful. Painful to the part where people didn't believe that it would ever happen. As we know, of course, it happened. This is very similar. There's going to be some change involved, there's going to be a little bit of pain involved, but once you make the move, you will be so glad that you did. And companies that make the move to BIM never go back. If you end up so you're in the pool with both feet, you will not go back to the way it used to be because you will see the benefits. So fear of change is the biggest barrier of BIM. We all have fear of change. Some of us have it at greater levels than others. People in your company, some of them will not be as difficult to win over as others, but we all know somebody in the company that you work with that cannot stand change. So there's a very famous book in the US called Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know how famous that book is out here. It's a very easy book to read. I'm sure it's been translated into your language because it's such a popular book. Small book, it's all about mice and cheese and the one mouse that resisted change and starved to death and the one that did not. But it's a great book if you have someone in the office who doesn't like change. I myself have been given that book by many people because despite my job, I also am not a big fan of change. So some things that they're afraid of: fear of the unknown. Oh my gosh, what is it going to be like? What if I can't figure it out? What if I let my team down because I can't figure it out? And I'm so comfortable in my zone right now with the way we do things, I don't want to leave that comfort zone. And maybe some of you can relate. I can completely relate. So some of the change in process. There's more emphasis that is placed on the early design. Much less time spent on construction and the documentation, much more on the early design. That's totally different than the way we're used to working. Less emphasis and time is spent on construction documents, as I just mentioned to you, much less time. Those extended design teams may become involved earlier. It used to be, okay, I did the design, I'm the architect, I hand it over to the civil people, and I hand it over to the structural people, and the MEP people, you know, but now, depending on your situation, they might become involved earlier in the process. You might all have to work together. Imagine that. Especially in large corporations where they have the multidisciplined firms, they will definitely become involved earlier in the process. I work a lot with Disney. Everybody knows Disney. And the division that I work with is in charge of the rides. And they used to have the process when they designed a ride, the Imagineers would start out by thinking about this fabulous ride that they wanted to build and design. And they would sketch it all out, and they would hand it over to the designers, and the designers would attempt to try to figure out what they meant and do their best to design it. They would pass it to everybody involved until they got to the construction group, to the contractors that needed to actually build the ride. And the construction folks would say, you are crazy, we can't build this ride. There's no way we can build this ride. And we're missing a variety of things that are required to build this ride. So then it would go back to the very front, back to the Imagineers. They would try to change their view of the ride, and it would go through the process again and again and again. Very time consuming, very painful for everybody involved. So not that long ago, actually, Disney adopted BIM. As a result of that, they get everybody in the room at the same time. They actually call it the war room because they're all in there fighting about everything at any given time. They work together, they come up with the designs. Early on, they realize if there are any problems in building the rides, and as a result of that, they're able to cut down the amount of time it takes them to build the rides almost by half. That's pretty amazing. As you can imagine, Disney's not going to go back and stop using BIM. They're going to continue down that process. Now, they live in a world where they can control all of the different disciplines. You may not live in that same world. Anyway, so as I mentioned, and the 3D model is the same way as a building is constructed. We talked about that earlier. That's something very different than the process most of us are used to today. So here's some reality, because I've told you how great BIM is, but let's think about the reality. You will not move to BIM overnight. You may have to invest in different software. If you're using AutoCAD, you're probably going to move to something like Revit. You may have to invest in better hardware. BIM models are more intense, more compute intensive on your computer, where the cloud really comes in handy, incidentally. It's going to take you time to get up and running. It's not going to happen overnight, and it is a continuous learning process. Each project that you do, you will get better at it. You will learn things that you should do, and you will definitely learn things that you should not do. And you will spend more time on your model at the beginning. You'll spend more time than you thought you should ever spend on the model. But once you get good at it, that won't take as much time as it did to begin with. It just takes a while to move to BIM. And I mentioned to you before, you don't have to jump in with both feet. You can just do maybe part of your project in BIM. And then over time, maybe put both feet in, because then you'll have a higher return on investment. So the change in technology tends to be the biggest fear. That's what everybody worries about. Actually, it should be the least thing that people worry about, but that's what everybody worries about. And in most cases, it's moving from AutoCAD to Revit, depending on your industry. So you think about the CAD operators, and this may be you, and believe me, I totally get this, because I'm known for my AutoCAD expertise. They're well-versed in AutoCAD, they're good at it, they can get their jobs done with it, they can get a paycheck from it, they're successful at it. Some of you have worked hard on your AutoCAD skills. Some of you know how to customize AutoCAD. Or maybe you've learned how to program AutoCAD. You've invested time in AutoCAD. You may have tried 3D in AutoCAD and didn't like it. And so you assume 3D in Revit is going to be terrible. I can tell you that in Revit, so much of the 3D just happens automatically behind the scenes without you having to even think about it. Very different experience. And you may or may not have any Revit knowledge. You know, there's no command line in Revit. How could you possibly use a program that doesn't have a command line, right? Very different. So I can promise you a few things. If you can learn AutoCAD, you can definitely learn Revit. Revit is newer, it's easier, it's friendlier, it's built specifically for the AEC industry. AutoCAD has been around for over 30 years. It's an old program, but it's, you know, the technology's been upgraded over time, but it's not nearly as friendly as our newer products like Revit. AutoCAD has about 10 different ways of doing anything. If you were to print out the AutoCAD help, the help file, it would be monstrous. We used to have manuals back when. It would show up with a hard copy manual. If you were to print that out, it would be huge. The Revit one, much smaller, because there aren't as many different ways to do everything. It's much more easy to use and more succinct. As I mentioned, a lot of this on here. Revit was designed specifically for AEC, AutoCAD, all things to all people. It was never designed specifically for AEC. And I love the fact that if you make a change in Revit, it happens across all the sheets, all the views. There's less tedium, and everybody seems to love that. That change it once, change it everywhere. No more polylining. Nobody likes polylining. So much of the 3D is generated automatically, like I mentioned. And after the learning curve, everybody's going to get their jobs done faster. But because it's a change, it will take you some time to get on board with that. And then I also like to say, on a personal level, if you can add BIM to your resume, you will be worth more, plain and simple. You will have an added skill. You'll be able to get a better job and ultimately make more money. Now, if you have a company that's willing to train you on BIM, or if you don't work for a company and you just want to expand your horizons, adding BIM to your resume is a great thing. Why would you say no to that? I've never understood that. Anytime my company was willing to train me on anything, I jumped all over it. It's all about investing in yourself. Then you get a chance to think about design, not just CAD, not how to get it on the paper, but to actually focus on the overall design. So companies who adopt BIM are seen as being more progressive. Don't you want to work for a progressive company? I do. And ultimately, BIM will make your company more money because it opens the door to more projects. The more projects you can make proposals for, the more money ultimately your company will make. So because my background was in training, I am very big into training, and I absolutely believe if you do not train your employees properly in just the process and the software, that you will not be successful in making the move over to BIM. Training is always the first thing to get cut, and it's the most important part of making the move to BIM. And timing is important. Don't train your staff on Revit if they're not going to use it for another 6 months. So that just-in-time training is very important when you make the move to BIM. So ideally, you find somebody who knows a lot about BIM to help you out. Hire a BIM manager, somebody who's done it before, or a consultant with experience. Work with your resellers. Your resellers have experience with BIM. Ultimately, that's the route to take. Or you get somebody who's really excited about making the move to BIM in your company and train them up and let them go to learn all they can about BIM. Ideally, you find someone who's already done it. And if you can work with other companies that have made the move to BIM, that will help you too, because they will help you be successful. And then I'm kind of big into getting a BIM champion, someone who's excited about it. Maybe that's you when you make the move to BIM, because the rest of the people that work with you or with them are going to need to be rallied. You're gonna need to keep them positive, because once again, it's a change. And whenever there's change, there's descendants in the troops. You need to keep them all together. Get a cheerleader. So I put together this list. I actually did some searching on Turkey and BIM, and I was going to put the name of the article that I found, but it was like this long, I knew you'd never remember it. But if you do Google BIM and Turkey, there's a paper that was posted comparing the UK, BIM implementation in the UK with BIM implementation in Turkey. It was pretty fascinating. I mean, here you guys have the second largest construction. You're the second largest construction country in the world, right, behind China. That's pretty impressive. So if anybody's going to really gain from making the move to BIM, it's going to be Turkey. And also another big advantage of all the changes is that things can be very international. You don't have to be in the same country with other companies to be successful in implementing BIM, especially not with the cloud, which we learned earlier, right? So here's just some suggestions. UK BIM Task Force, bimtaskgroup.org, has a lot of information on making the move to BIM. Yeah, if you're going to take a picture of a slide, this would be the one to take. In the US, we have the AIA, which is a very famous organization, and they've written some protocol that's very popular in the United States. And a lot of this is quoted from the United States because, well, I'm there and that's where I work with the most. There's also an organization called the BIM Forum that created a level of development document. When you're designing in BIM, are you going to design all the way down to the junction box? How far down are you going to go? What is really BIM? Is it the outside of a building? Is it every single thing that needs to be modeled on the inside? So there are different levels of development. Something else for you to take a look at. And if you put a proposal in saying that you're using BIM, you need to figure out what does that mean to the person, to the building owner, or whoever's in charge of the project. How far down do you really have to model BIM? As time goes on, you'll get better and you'll do more and more. But in some cases, maybe you don't ever need to. In the US, and also it's used widely in Europe, there's this famous BIM execution plan done by Penn State, Pennsylvania State. And everybody talks about it, and it's a very detailed way to set up your first BIM implementation. And then also Autodesk University has plenty of online courses that are absolutely free to take on different, small companies, big companies, governments, and whatnot that have adopted BIM from all over the world. And that's free. Also, autodeskuniversity.com. Get buy-in from everybody who's involved. That's very important. So you're going to start with the low-stress project, right? You're not going to start off with the most, the tallest building in the world. You want to start off with something that's simple, something that hopefully you've already done before, so you have expertise in what needs to be done. And, for example, like a single-story building, something simple, maybe 2 stories, that's steel framed and it has a consistent column grid, just as an example. Don't do a renovation. That's another animal. Building, hopefully, that you can start from scratch, but that's ideal. That's for those of you who are in architecture or AEC. So don't give up. Don't give up and go back. You've got to keep moving forward. You can't give up. If it's easy, you're going to want to give up. You're going to go, this is too hard. It'll be worth it in the long run. And then for those of you who are in upper management, it's very important that you be patient because making the move to BIM takes time, just like it did when we made the move to from paper to CAD. As a result, you'll have a happy workforce. You're going to get your projects done faster. You will win over more projects, and ultimately your business will be more successful. I've seen it everywhere. And when I first started doing my job, BIM didn't even exist. And I've seen more and more countries and companies start to make the move to BIM, and I have seen the success. I see the enthusiasm that we used to have with CAD in the early days now has moved to BIM. It's very exciting to see people who have really totally adopted BIM and how successful they are. And I mentioned this early. Once you do make the move to BIM, trying to get you to go back is very difficult. If you make the move to Revit, same deal. Try to get a Revit user to move back to AutoCAD. Good luck with that. Very hard to do. So, you will have rebels. We all have rebels in our company, the ones who do not like to adopt change. So what should you do with them? There will still be documentation that you will decide to do in AutoCAD regardless of your industry. I have yet to find a company that doesn't ever touch AutoCAD. I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't really seen them. So AutoCAD still exists, still important. That's why it's included in our suites. It's included in the building design suite and the infrastructure design suite because we know that ultimately you still may need to do some documentation in it. Keep them around because as I mentioned, once your employees move to Revit, getting them to go back to use AutoCAD will not be easy. So I'm kind of finished. I think I've pretty much summarized all of this earlier, so I'm going to just kind of flip through this and move forward. I do like on this page, slightly different though, regular check-in meetings to make sure all the employees are doing okay and to listen to everybody. Make modifications as you go along is very, very important. Make sure you document what worked and what didn't work so you can use it when you move forward with the next project. So, as I mentioned, make the move to BIM is the right decision, just like it was moving to CAD 25 years ago. You could say 30 years almost. And that's it. Now, the most important part of the day, we get to relax and have cocktails or juice or whatever it is you choose to drink, but I get to relax. But I'm happy to talk to you guys about anything. So I'm going to get off the stage. Some of you are just going to go home. Maybe you should wait till the traffic dies down. But it never dies down, right? No, it never dies down. So thank you so much for your time. It's been delightful being here, and I'm happy to chat with any of you afterwards. Thank you. Thank you.